This meeting is being recorded.
This meeting is being recorded, and we are on May 24th, and we're studying the book of Ruth. And we're gonna just review the first chapter. Here we go. So, in the days when the chieftains ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah with his wife and two sons went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and his two sons were named Machlon and Chilion. Ephrathites of Bethlehem in Judah, they came to the country of Moab and remained there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth, and they lived there for about 10 years. Then those two, Machlon and Chilion, also died. So the woman was left without her two sons and without her husband. And we talked about the depth of that feeling of abandonment and being lonely. She started out with her daughters in law to return from the country of Moab, for in the country of Moab she had heard that the Lord had taken note of his people and given them food. Accompanied by her two daughters in law, she left the place where she had been living, and they set out on the road back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters in law, "Turn back, each of you, to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." And that's where we're going to pick it up, okay? So we may have gone over this a little bit. I'm going to overlap a little bit. I find so fascinating that it says, Vatomer Naomi lishtei chalotea, lechna shovna, nice parallel pair, go, return, isha levet ima. I think we mentioned this last. Go back to your mother. Go back to your mother's household, right? Why your mother? Your mother's going to be comfort, as opposed to go back to your father, which is where they would normally go. It would be normally under the patrilineal framework, the way that Tamar has to go back to her father's house after the death of her husband in the story of Joseph, Judah, back in chapter 37, I think it is, of the book of Reshit. Ya'as Adonai imachem chesed. May the Lord deal kindly with you, kasher asitem, as you have done, ima metim, you have dealt kindly with the dead, the imadin. And I mean, it just, you could hear the pathos, you can hear the pain. And I would even go so far as say the depression. This is a woman, and she's rightfully depressed. I mean, she's lost everybody. She's lost her husband, her two sons. She has nobody. So go back. Ima meitim v'imadim. It's almost like we're in the same category. She's among she knows she's separate. She knows she's alive, but she's been broken, and so it's is she apart herself from the dead, or is she with the dead? How is she going on? And that theme, I think, is going to be really, really important. How do you live with the dead? Okay. And she says, I have nothing. Okay. And you go back. And then she goes, may the Lord grant that each of you find security in the house of a husband, right? That'll be a great blessing. Everyone, both of you, your daughter, your two widows, get married again. Isha bet Isha, woman to each your husband. Vatishak lahen, she kisses them. Vatisena kolan, they lift up their voices. Vatifkena, they weep. It's a very, let's just say it's emotional. It's an emotional moment, very feminine moment. Okay, very, three women just wailing and bawling their eyes out, okay? Because there's so much emotional intensity at its peak here. They said to her, Ki itach nashuv le'amech. Both of them are saying at this point, we want to go back with you to your people. So Naomi says, Shovna v'notai, turn around, my daughters. Lama telachna imi, why go with me? Ha'od li vanim b'me'ai, do I have any more sons in my womb? Vayu lachem lanashim, for husbands. Shovna v'notai, lechna, nice poetry. Lechna, shovna, shovna, lechna, right? It's all, ABBA form here. Shovna v'notai, v'notai, shovna. It's a very, very beautiful music. Go back, my daughters, and walk back. Ki zakanti miyot leish. I'm too old to be with a man. I'm too old for a husband. Ki amarti yesh li tikva. Even if I thought I had hope, gam hayiti halayla leish v'gam yaladati vanim. And I mentioned this last time. I mean, there's this very kind of direct, it's not even the sexual overtones of this are not even lost on us. Am I gonna have sex with a man now and have children? I mean, she's being pretty blunt now, okay? And this is what we appreciate about the Bible. The Bible doesn't really hide anything in terms of their sexuality, and I think the fact that it's three women talking, makes it's not a caricature. It's like women will relate to their sexuality, in a very direct way to other women, okay? And speaking as a man. Go ahead, Marlene.
Well, do we have any idea how old they might be? Because if they each married young, she could theoretically, right, Susie? Couldn't she still have children?
No.
There was a gap in your speech, so I didn't hear everything you said.
How old do you think these women are? If Naomi married young, and if these women married Machlon and Chilion when they were young, they're still all...
They could be in their 40s.
So it's clear that Ruth and Orpah are still of childbearing age. Naomi is, Naomi, you're getting an echo here of Sarah. Naomi is like old. She's had children, but she's now moving past her childbearing years. That's the sense that she certainly understands herself to be in. Okay,
Menarche was later in those years. I don't know when menopause was in those years.
Who knows? Okay, so should we wait for them to grow up? Should you, on their account, debar yourselves from marriage? Ad anna yigdalu halahin te'agena livilti hayot leish al benotai. Don't do this, my daughters. Ki mar li me'od. And here the beautiful pun. Naomi is sweet, but mar is bitter. I am bitter. I am so bitter. Ki yatsa v'yad Adonai. And she interprets everything as to be the hand of God. Okay? And they broke into weep. Vatisena kolan vatifkana od. They cry and they wail. Vatishak Orpah lechamota veRut dafka ba. And so Orpah kisses her goodbye, and Ruth stays there. And we talked about this a little last time. Do you blame Orpah? I don't blame Orpah at all. She gets a terrible rap from the rabbis. It's really cruel, how they construct a character around her, but she has every right to want to go back home and to make a life. But we'll maybe we'll see that there might be something implicit in the relationship here.
When she said to them, "Go back to your people," does that mean that they hadn't yet accepted being part of the Hebrew clan?
I want to hold that question because you're picking up on an idea, which is that Naomi is saying, go back to your people, and the scene that we would play out if we were like shooting the movie here is that they're somewhere on the road and there's like an abrupt stop, and it's like they are allied with Naomi and her people, and Naomi wants to cleave them, wants to separate them, and have them go back to their own people. So up until the moment that Orpah goes back, they are, the three of them, really clinging together, and they are determined to return to Judea. But it's Naomi that says, go back to your own. Go back to your own. You are, and here, I mean, again, we're going to pull out, the ethnic tension. These are Moabites, and Naomi is a Judahite. So while there are distant relations and cultural, maybe there are some linguistic, it would be the same way that, I don't know, is one Slavic language is related to another Slavic language. It wouldn't be far-fetched to imagine that the Moabite language is all that different from the Hebrew language in the way that Dutch is not that, is related to German as a Germanic language, and in the way that Ukrainian is a Slavic language related to Russian, I think, right? Or that even English and French, I mean, they're related, okay?
Rabbi,
Yes.
Saying
but Rabbi, they're not with their people. They
No.
left and went to Beit Lechem.
No. They're,
Enter-
Naomi went from Beit Lechem to Moab at the beginning of the famine, and that is where Machlon and Chilion married the two Moabites. Okay, and they died.
That's where that's where they are. They're not with their people. So they were not part of their people yet. There was no reason to be. Nobody was there.
No, our frame by frame shooting here is that they're on the way back from Moab to Judea. Okay, and in Moab, Naomi is saying, "Hey, Ruth and Orpah, you basically stay in this territory, stay in Moab. I'm going back to Judea."
Right, but you made a comment. Somebody asked the question: were they not part of her? Were they not part of Naomi's before? And they weren't, because there was nothing to be part of. It
That's
was just
correct.
her. They
You're
were
right.
living.
Yeah, you're right. They're not part. They have not joined anything yet. They're kind of in between. It's a mixed marriage, right? And they're not. But territorially, they're on Moab territory. She's basically saying, you know what? Don't throw your lot in with me. Stay here. Stay in your territory. Stay and go back to your mother. Okay. So in this moment, then, and there was another hand here, or someone else want to make a comment?
It's interesting that we're doing this today because in Daf Yomi, the discussion is about whether you can marry Moabite and Edomite women and what happens to the house of Judah when they try to, and then it all comes down to King David. So
Yes. Okay, so it's a nice coincidence. Okay, so they break into weeping, and Orpah kissed her mother. "Vatishak Orpah lechamota veRuth davka ba." It's very, very profound sense here. Okay, and now this is the scene. Vatomer. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has returned to her people. Hine shava yivimtech el ama ve'el Elohecha." She's returned to her people and her gods. Shuvi acharei yivimtech. So those of us who are reading closely, we get the little insinuation here. She's saying not only did she return to her people, she returned to her gods. Okay? Shuvi acharei yivimtech. Go after, follow your sister-in-law. But Ruth replied, here we go. Al tifki'ivi le'azvech lashuv me'acharayich. Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. Ki el asher telchi elech, uva asher talini alin, amech ami, ve'elohayich Elohai. Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. For wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Ba'asher tamuti amut, v'sham ekaver. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Ko yoseh Adonai li v'cho yosif. Thus and more may the Lord do to me. Ki amavet yafrid beni uvenech. Death will be the only thing that separates me from you. And then it says, when Naomi saw Vatere ki mitametzet hi lalechet ita vatechtal ledaber ela. When she saw mitametzet, that she was so tough to go with her, she stopped talking to her. Okay? So that's what happened. I'm going to leave the reading there and I'm going to go to a different text here for a second. All right? And here we go. So we're going to do this in very granular detail. Okay? And I'll put it up now. Here we go. So this is what she says. Hine shava yivimtech, your daughter, your sister-in-law has gone back to El Amma ve'el Elohea, to her people and to her gods. Shuvi acharei yivimtech, go, follow, return after your sister-in-law. And so Ruth says, Al tifki'i vi le'azvech, do not push me, entreat me. We'll talk about that word in a second. To abandon you, to turn from behind you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you sleep, I will sleep. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and I will be buried there. Thus shall God do to me, and thus shall He increase. For death will separate me and you. So in the column here, I've put the numbers of words. Total 34. Okay, so here are my questions. Where is the center of the text? Okay, I'm always interested in how a text works. Okay, and the theory that I kind of advocate and try to prove when it works is that the center of a text is always it's the core, it's the DNA, it's the nucleus. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the text, and here we go. This is the famous line. Al tifki'i vi, 3. La azvech lashuv me'acharayich, 3. Ki el asher telchi elech, 5. Uvasher talini alin, 3. Amech, ami, Elohayich, Elohai. Okay, so should I let you do the math, or we'll do it together? 3, 6, 11, 14. 3, 5, 11, 16. Total 34. Where is the center? What's the center word? So it's 3, 6, 11, 14. Aline is the 14th word. We're looking for word 17. 15, 16. Bing! Elohayich, your God. Okay? So you could say that the fulcrum of the text is really here, between this word and this word. Your God, my God. Okay, so everything up here is one half, and everything down here is another half. Okay, and what we're saying then is that there's the implicit core of this is God, right? And that's the driver, and that's why Ruth, is so admired and adored, because she makes the leap from her people to the people of Israel and then to God. Now, the traditional way that we interpret this, and here I have to remember, Rabbi David Hartman, who said this so often, and it's such a powerful and true interpretation. He used to say, when a person converts to Judaism, the paradigm of Ruth is the paradigm that is used, which is, it is a leap into solidarity with peoplehood first, and then God. And I've no reason to disagree with him or to debate him. It's to say that your entry point into Judaism is through peoplehood. That's what he's trying to say, and that the forming element for Judaism is peoplehood, and the core of peoplehood is God. That's how I would interpret this. Amech Ami is I step into Jewish peoplehood as the first element in my entry to Judaism, and I make my relationship to God subsequent to my relationship with the people. Okay? Therefore, the opposite is not what is adjudicated in the conversion process. It's, and to a certain extent, we still practice this day, which is when someone comes to convert, at least, in my experience with conversion, which is, always a beautiful thing. We tend not to ask first about God, but we tend to ask about, how do you feel as a Jew? How do what's your connection to the Jewish people? And then what's your connection to Torah? And from that you move to, it's your connection to God. And it's I think Jews in general have a very intuitive understanding. I mean, it's intuitive, implicit. It's not articulated, and to the extent that if you were to ask, everyone why they come to shul, I suspect it's not necessarily because they want to be with God, but they want that connection to community, and we make the mistake, often of thinking that it's only community, and we tend not to think about God. But the community is a conduit to God, and just in being honest, we all have our issues with God. That's what it means to be a modern Jew, I think, and I don't want to be too sarcastic about it. But it's more about the peoplehood. I mean, I have been sarcastic about it, especially if you've seen our Torah, our Parsha talks. We were talking about. I had this conversation with a couple of people, but on the Parsha talk before Pesach, we were talking about, the experience of the Seder, and my debate with my colleagues was, they were saying how much they wanted to experience, the godly element of it, and I said, that's great, except I want to be there with my family, and we so understand that we are formed and shaped by the peoplehood, and that God is the element that emerges from your framework of the peoplehood. So that's what that statement means, and that's when I would say that at the core of this iconic statement is God, because God is at the core, but it's framed by peoplehood. Okay? So now, my second question. Up until the moment in verse 15 in which Naomi insists that Ruth return, has Naomi ever mentioned God or gods? What is implied by her mentioning it here? So back to verse 15, which is Vatomer, she says, Hine shava yimitek, your sister-in-law returned El Ama ve'el Eloheha, to her people and to her gods. What's the meaning of Naomi saying that? Okay, well, it's pretty, it's implicit, but it's a, as we would say in Yiddish, it's a slight shtoch. Go ahead, Marlene.
Would you just conjugate God, the God word, Eloheha?
Yes, Eloheha, her gods.
It's plural?
So it's plural in the way that Elohim is plural, and I mean, it's certainly plausible that there would be a pantheon in Moab, okay? But Elohim doesn't necessarily have to be plural, because we say Elohim all the time and don't mean it as a plural. So she's going back to her gods or her God, okay? She's not going to use the word Adonai, because Adonai is the name of the God of Israel, and she's not going to use El. It's that does Eloheha is the what would it be? Baaleha. Moab is not a Baal nation, and she's not going to mention Chemosh, which is the name of the god of Moab. I think that's it. She's going to just use a generic. Okay.
repeat what she had said before, to go back to your people or to your mother or to your father.
Right.
It's go
So,
back to your gods.
right. So it's not lost on us who are reading it now at 10 power magnification that she says this, which is in Yiddish, she's giving her a shtoch, right? And this is, so I do appreciate and respect and honor Naomi, but I have empathy for her because of her bitterness, and she's kind of like, on the one hand, what she's saying is, look, I told her to go back, and she's going back, but she went back. You know?
Marlene, also in the Bible, Elohim is generic deity.
It's a generic, yes. It's
But
like,
it doesn't necessarily mean a lot of them.
no,
because
it doesn't. It doesn't.
She doesn't say to her other daughter-in-law the same way. She
Yes,
doesn't think that she should go back to her other gods.
she doesn't say that to her daughter. That's the point. The point is that in the previous text, which I have in another file, she's saying, "Go back to your people." But this is when Orpah turned away and went back. Naomi says she went back to her people and her God. And so the fact that she adds "and her God, El Elohea," is a way of saying, she needed to go back to her God. She needed her religion. She needed her culture. She went back, and the implication is to Ruth. She's saying to Ruth, you go back to your gods as well. You go back to your gods, and that's why. I mean, when we quote what Ruth says, we forget that it's a rebuttal to what Naomi said. Naomi's saying, your sister-in-law went back to her people and her God, and it's shuvi acharei yevimtech. Go after your sister-in-law, which implies do what she did. Go after her people and go after her gods. And Ruth answers in a kind of smackdown. It's very, very, we think of her as very sweet, but she's really kind of caustic here. Al tifki'i bi, don't push me, is what the word pegi'i. It's got a lot of semantic range, the word lifgoa, but I want to interpret here as don't push my back to the wall. Al tifki'i bi, lazvech, to abandon you. Lashuv me'acharech means to turn my back to you and to leave you on the way. Okay? So in other words, wait a second. Don't make me do this don't push me against the wall. Don't make me abandon you. Don't make me turn my back against you. Wherever you go, God, etc. Go ahead, Marlene.
Maybe that Ruth is responding to Naomi's desperate cry that she's all alone and everyone is leaving her. And so she's saying these more in an emotional way and not the God way.
No, I'm gonna allow that. Because I think the text is so rich. It's a poetic text that lends itself to so many different kinds of interpretations here. What's the emotional content here? And we could ask this, and maybe I'll leave the screen up for a second. It's when you say to someone, "Go," are you really saying to them, "But stay"?
Well,
and
a voice when she says shuvi, if she's crying or if she's demanding.
Look, in any intense relationship where there's a parting that's going to take place, and here it's a forever parting, which is, you're going to go back to your life, and we're never going to see each other again. Okay, so it's I want to say we can certainly interpret Naomi as being kind of blunt and stark and definite with no ambiguity. You go back. Don't even think about coming with me. Okay, but even when saying that, the tension is not resolved. Orpah resolved the tension by turning back, and as we say, with kindness to her, she did what she needed to do. No blame, no judgment. She did what she needed to do. But the fact that Naomi kind of inserts that she went back to her God, it's a bit of judgment. I'm sorry. Naomi is being the guilt Jewish mother, as another stereotype. She's saying, look at her. She went back to her gods. You go back, you follow her too. And Ruth is saying, I'm not her. I'm not going back. I'm going to go with you. And but there's I want to say that as clear as she means it and says it, there's ample room for just a little bit of ambiguity. That's what I want to say. And so one way to resolve it is to leave, which Orpah does. Another way to resolve the tension is, yeah, I'm going with you. Too bad, right? Which means, again, we talked about this last time, but we have to understand, or we have to even just kind of put a little bubble head of a question in our mind, which is, what's in her interest to go? There are lots of reasons why Ruth could be going with her, and the fact is that, or one of them could be that she has nothing to go back to.
They heard that there was food in Bethlehem, so they were
it could be dozens of reasons.
comforting the mourner.
Absolutely. Okay. I don't have any debate with that. Okay. So now that's so Naomi's insistence, I think, is a kind of shtuch, but also a slight ambiguity. What is contained in the world of Tifkeibi, which she says, I do not, she's really saying, don't push me against the wall. So I have a whole sheet on the word lifkoa, which is, there's so many different layers of that word, which is, I'm entreating you, but I'm also pushing you. Okay? Question 4. These words, la'azvech lashuv me'acharayich, to leave you, to return from behind you. What is contained in this parallel phrase? The second, lashuv me'acharayich, is an intensification of the first. She means, I'm not going to betray you. I'm not going to abandon you. And in abandonment, there is a sense that there's something more. I am a part of you, and to leave you would be to betray you. Question 5. All right, here we go. Ki el asher telchi elech, wherever you go, I will go. Basher talini alin, and you, wherever you sleep, I will sleep. What is the connection between Lina and halach, going and sleeping? Are there echoes of any other stories here? Okay, so I'm going to ask it's a Bible quiz question. Do you recall any other characters in the Bible, and I'll give you a hint, women characters who say, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. Okay.
Rivka? Does Rivka
That
do
is
that?
one. Good point, Susie. You win. And another one. Another very important woman character in the contemporary book of Judges, Devorah. Devorah, who says, I'll put this here, up here. When Eliezer travels to Aram, he says, do you have a place for us to sleep? Lalun, at the beginning of his story. Gam makon lalun. And then at the end of the story, they say to Rivka, because she's saying it's such an amazing moment, right? Where they have made this match to the servant, okay, and then they finally turn to the girl and say, "Nu, you want to go with him? You're going to go?" They give her the right of refusal. So she said, the family, all the men in the household are turning to the women, and all of history hinges on this moment. It's so powerful. They say, Hatelchi, you're going to go with this man? And she says one word, Elech. I'm going. And that one word, Elech, is the word that defines Jewish history. Okay? As usual in the Torah, everything hinges on singular moments. That moment, the moment of decision by a woman who is given autonomy and freedom to do that, unlike anywhere else in the biblical world, but she has the right there. So all those who criticize the Bible as being misogynist should kind of, reacquaint themselves with the story. She says, I'm going. I will go. And so to the biblical ear, to us who read the Bible, when Ruth says, wherever you go, wherever you sleep, I will sleep, and wherever you go, I will go. Elech is bing, 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 echo, echo. I'm now linked up with another strong woman character. Ruth is now in the tradition of Rebecca. A. B. Ruth is now in the tradition of Deborah. Vayomer Elea Barak. When they're going out to war against Sisera, Barak says to her, Im telchiimi v'alachti. If you go with me, I will go. Im lo telchiimi lo elech. And she said, and if you don't go with me, I'm not going. So here is the Israelite general saying to the female judge, okay, I'm not going if you're not going. If you go, I'm going. If you don't go, I'm not going, right? So how much power and strength does the female character have in this instance, where the whole, again, future of the people depends on this partnership between a man and a woman, between the female judge and the male general, okay? It's astounding. Zemadhim, okay? It's amazing, all right? So in both stories, there's strong women characters. 1 second. I don't think it's a coincidence, but Marlene, go ahead.
Maybe it's not feminine. Maybe it's just intelligence.
Well, I think it's not lost.
Private a gender.
As I'm a card carrying masculine male. Okay, so bearded and all. I can't apologize for it anymore. It's just what it is. Okay, and even as a masculine male bearded white man and all the other things that you want to say, I'm stunned by the fact that the Bible is unabashed in its adoration and veneration of the female characters here. They are integral to the story, period. End of story. They're what we're saying here is that these formidable women, Ruth, Rebecca, Naomi, Deborah, are the drivers of the story. It's just a fact. You can't avoid it. And then you would say, I would say, well, of course, the women are the drivers of every story. Let's face it, right? That's just the truth. Okay.
Oh, so it is just intelligence, and you've got it.
How do you like that? Okay, here we go. So Amech Ami Velohai Elohai. It's a rebuttal. My question, I'm going to have the question up here, which is, what does it mean? What does the punchline really mean? And I have the rebuttal. It's a rebuttal to her. We say this text as like, we say it with love and adoration and total admiration for her, but she's really saying, you know what, your people are my. There's a little bit of charif, right? There's a little bit of spice in that statement, as opposed to lovingness. It's your people are my people, and your God is my God. And I'm not going back to the people that I came from, and I'm not going back to my God, the God that I came from. I'm going to yours, okay? So I know I'm not going to abandon you. Not only that, but I know you, what you now think about Orpah, that she really left you to go back to her way of life and her God. I'm all in. I'm going to your people, and I'm going to your God, okay? The seventh question I'm asking on this text is, what does she mean when she says, Bashir tamuti amut, where you die, I will die, v'shame kaver. So there are echoes of what there? When she says that, you may have just seen my answer. The answer is, she is going there because who gets to be buried next to whom? Family. Family gets to be buried next to family. It's still, and all the text erased here, okay. Sorry. The ultimate, eternal Maharata Mechpelah, is where everybody goes. You say, I am gathered up to your ancestors. That's what what it means to be together. Eternity. I mean, we practice this to this very day. You are buried in the family plot, okay? And when you are buried in the family plot, it's a signal that you are linked for eternity, okay? And when you are detached, when you're buried alone or apart, it signals something else. Now, you may say, and we can concur with that does it really matter where you're buried? After all, you go in the ground, and it doesn't really matter. But the truth is, it does matter, because these things are a statement to the living. I spend, of course, unfortunately, a lot of time in cemeteries, and I find cemeteries to be the most among fascinating places. And cemeteries tell stories. We just had a couple of funerals, so it was with in both of these funerals, by the way. So the deceased were buried with their family, or actually, yeah, close to family, and that's fascinating. In the case of Wendy's mom, she's buried in Passaic Junction, which is in Saddlebrook. So you remember last year I took a trip to Paterson, New Jersey, and became very interested in some of the history there, and this Temple Emmanuel, the very famous shul, conservative shul, which doesn't exist anymore. A lot of those members are buried in that cemetery, and there's a big sepulcher to Simon Fabian of the Fabian Theater chain. So he's right there, and he was a big mogul of the early history of theater and motion pictures. Okay, anyway, an aside. Last two questions. So burial is really important, and burial is about eternity. And the question 9, Hamavet. We'll leave out question 8, which is Kol Yaseh Adonai v'Kol Yasif, which is a kind of oath statement. May God do this to me, and may God increase. And she says, Hamavet Yafrid Beni Uvenech. Only death will separate me from you. But she's already said, I'm going to be buried next to you. So there's a kind of implicit ambiguity here, which is, I'm never going to be separate from you. But when you die, of course, I'll be alive. But I'm only going to be waiting to join you. Okay? And why do I point this out? I point this out, and I'm going to close the screen here. I point this out because, again, the notion of common burial and death as a separator is it's not a Jewish, it's a universal. No, I mean every culture has its connection to that as a motif, and some of the greatest legends and stories have that connection. You've heard me refer before to the death of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson on the same day, right? When you watch the documentaries of the founders of this country, the fact that John Adams, right, and Thomas Jefferson, who were at once political rivals, but they have an amazing correspondence, and 50 years on July 4th to the day, they both die. They have this intense personal friendship through letters, and uh, Adams' last words, I think, are Jefferson lives, right? Because he didn't hear yet that Jefferson had died earlier that day. They were separated by several hundred miles, and so death does not divide them, right? And part of what we experience in the deepest part of our souls, especially around loss and especially with death, is that the sense of the terrible breach between us and the dead, right? And so the natural emotional statement that is made in this period of extreme anguish, especially for a loved one, especially like a loved one like your life mate, is I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be apart from you. I cannot be apart from you. And, I actually have had experiences, one incredible experience in which a couple, they were well advanced and lived a very beautiful life. Uh, and they happened to be in the hospital at the same time. And you can finish the story. The story was that uh, she passed away, and then a few hours later, he passed away. So both, so the daughter comes to me. They weren't, it was one of these things where of course, they called me up, and and I said, I mean, on the one, you can't help but say that you've been dealt a double portion of grief, and on the other hand, you have a double portion of comfort. I can't say it any other way, because here were these two people who lived their whole lives, and it said, "V'hamavet lo yafrid b'nei uvenech." Death did not divide them. So is that a blessing? And so we're left with the sense that here's the intensity of the attachment that Ruth has to Naomi. That Ruth is younger than Naomi, but saying death will not divide me from you, which is kind of not true, because the way of the world is that Naomi is going to depart before Ruth, and Ruth is not going to jump into the grave after Naomi, but she pledges that she'll be buried next to her. So she does as much as she can to say, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you reside, I will reside. You're da 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 da. Wherever your death will not separate. I will be buried where you will be buried. Death will not separate me, but death will separate me from you, but only for a short period of time. And I find this so rich. The statement that she made is just so you know replete with meaning, because it's about the intensity of devotion and love. And the intention of devotion and love is where everything is on the table. It's ultimate. It's about life and death. And so in this statement is the echoes of destiny and history, and also the sense that, like the Song of Songs says, for love is as strong as death. And so you have here, um, it's an intergenerational love. It's now, she's adopted Naomi as her mother, and she's saying, as her mother, death will not divide you. Now, for the bonus marks, there's one other instance of that statement being, death will not divide you from me. Okay? And I'm going to ask you if you know where this is. And I will show you right now. Here it is. Ki hamavet yafrid b'nei, only death will separate us. Oh, where did it go? Shaul v'Yonatan, Saul and Jonathan, hane'evim, beloved to each other, v'hane'imim, sweet, adored, b'chayehem, in their lives, uvimotam lo nifradu, and in their death, they were not separated. Min sharim kala mi'ara, they were greater than eagles, etc., and lions. But this is the thing, uvimotam lo nifradu. So if you just recall for a second the story of Saul and Jonathan die in the same day. They die in a battle on the Gilboa Mountains, and it's a horrible, gruesome death. But the father and the son die on the same day. David, of course, has this very beautiful relationship with Jonathan, had a kind of complicated relationship with Saul. and the pain and the complicated emotion that he has on hearing of the death of Saul and Jonathan. He says to them, in death they were not separated. So that's what she's, that's what Ruth is saying. She's saying, in a way, chronologically, the story of Ruth and Naomi appears before David. David, of course, is her descendant. Okay, but the biblical writer, is playing a trick on us. Okay, maybe, charitably, you could say that the writer of the David Jonathan story is hearkening back to the Ruth Naomi story, and that's possibly true. Okay, one way or the other, it's amazing. They're both making reference to each other, and they're saying here, and they're in the inversion of each other, because in the case of David and Saul and Jonathan, so it's Saul king, Jonathan prince, David outside. Okay, and here is uh, uh, matriarch Naomi, bereaved matriarch Naomi, and daughter-in-law, okay, surrogate Ruth, and she's saying, "I will be next to you. Death will not suit." So I think it's amazing. It's amazing. It's an amazing parallel here, and I think it's deliberate, either from the author of the book of Samuel or the author of the book of Ruth. They're both making reference to each other. Maybe they're the same author altogether. Who knows? So all of this is kind of compressed into that statement. So next time you hear your people are my people, this is what we have the problem in Judaism, that we kind of daven every single text and seldom spend the time putting it under a magnifying glass, to see how rich they are, and how deeply encoded in these texts are worlds of emotion and relationships and meaning, right? And the intensity of the relationship between two people, here in this case, a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, which is, when the fear of being separate from each other, that's echoed down to this day. People can relate to that. People who live in these, blessed relationships understand what it means to be apart from someone. Certainly, that's true in partnerships and marriages, and certainly is true in sibling relationships, and certainly it's true in parent-child relationships. Absolutely. Okay, and this is what that statement evokes, beyond just conversion, which is in itself an intense attachment. Final comments, anybody? Anybody have anything else to say? Because I need a drink. Anybody?
Right?
Go ahead, Judy.
Where is Elimelech and his sons buried?
So Elimelech is buried in Moab. They're not exhuming him and taking him back to Canaan. To Judea. There's no way that's happening. He's there. He's, and part of, you have to understand that in the Bible, to be buried outside the homeland is a certain kind of, there's a certain blight on that. We have echoes of that to this day, as people pay a lot of money to get buried in Israel, and there's a whole industry around that. But this comes out of antiquity, of being buried in your ancestral land. Joseph wants to be buried in the ancestral land. Al natik bereni. Jacob, dies in Egypt, and he does not want to be buried in Egypt. He wants to be buried in Canaan. It's very, very powerful. And of course, a lot of things happen because, Jacob and the whole entourage move and be buried and has his funeral back in Canaan. And to this day, of course, there's a whole transportation industry around moving people back and transporting them around, after death, because we live so far apart from each other, right? That's exactly what's happening here. But of course, in antiquity, it couldn't happen. You just couldn't exhume someone, bring the bones back. Only with the case of Joseph is that happen. Any other? So we left you with such intensity, okay? And of course, the story, Ruth is one of the only stories in the Bible that has a happy ending. Because Ruth is the ancestor of David, of King David. Anyway, So that's where we'll leave it. I want to wish everybody a beautiful Memorial Day weekend. And of course, Shavuot coming up next week. Have a lovely, lovely couple of weeks. I'll miss you and I'll think of you and I'll gather material and insights to share with you. We'll probably talk about some other things when I get back. We're gonna leave the text here. It's such a delight to share these things with you, and I'll see you in the next edition of our little show here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a safe trip, Rabbi.
Thank you very
Dank
much.
so sehr.
Great to see you.
Be
all.
gesund and kommt gesund.
Kommt gesund. Amen.
Amen.